Okay, here we are. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of A Life Economy, dedicated to exploring the intersection of technology, spirituality, and consciousness. I'm here joined with Torkom Ji, sound healer and creator of visual reality. Welcome, Torkom.
Hey, what's up, Cosmo? Thank you so much for having me today.
Absolutely. I am really stoked for us to be talking. We've known each other for a few years now. And man, this is a crazy time. I'm curious how the coronavirus has been impacting you as an artist. I've noticed that you've been doing a lot more live streams lately, and has that been successful? What has that been like?
Yes, a good question. So, as I'm sure anyone tuning in can imagine, the entire event production, just going outside, anything having to do with, being around people as an industry or as a practice has been affected. I was just also thinking about body workers, massage therapists. So it's just so many implications here, but for sure, all the festivals, all the events that we usually look forward to through spring, summer, um, even maybe at this point through December and winter, have been either canceled or postponed indefinitely. So it's been incredible to see how resilient artists and especially festival goers and people who construct these elaborate cities for like a weekend, immediately shifted to this pipeline of, hey, let's get our network together. Let's put out this concert next weekend. Let's do it in 2 weeks. Let's do it within 3 days. This amazing stuff's been pulled off because people are just coming together and they want to share
Hmm.
art, their voice, their expression, and whatever it is that they, really have been honing in their craft on with the world. And so any other timeline, it's like we wouldn't have the internet to be able to do that. But I guess now we can in a certain way. So
Yeah, absolutely. It is an interesting moment where we're all trapped inside, but luckily we you know the internet is really our salvation here, right? Like what would we be doing with our time? It's kind of hard to imagine how much time we're really spending on our computers now is even more intense and more dramatic than before.
it's true. And it's even more of a reminder to just stop everything and get outside and take a walk. And obviously, 10 feet away from any other human and whatever it is the protocols are right now, it's hard to keep up. I mean, it's changing every day, and there's so much we're learning every day about how this thing spreads and how it doesn't, or how long it lives, or whatever the case may be. But for sure, it's a thing. It's a scary thing, and I personally have family who's been afflicted by the virus, so I know firsthand
Hmm.
that it can definitely put you out for a couple of weeks in a way that is hard to remember any other time where that's probably happened to you in the same way. So that's what I've been hearing from some of the people that I know who've gotten it. And so I definitely think that there's also a level of anxiety that we can't really let our nervous system and our immune system um, kind of succumb to.
Hmm.
And I think that's the number one thing that I've learned through 10 years of meditation, um, diving into these practices, yogic practices, breath work, sound therapy, um, is there's this synergy obviously with our system, our body, our surroundings, and when we're not in the flow with that, um, there's so many other repercussions health wise that can snowball. And I've read there's a lot of research that shows just simply looking at art or being in a museum and going and looking at a gallery can boost your immune system, can
Hmm.
boost your nervous system. It's actually good for your health to experience art. And the
Amazing.
same could be said
Interesting.
about music.
Hmm.
Yes, and this is why art therapy is a legitimate medical. It's a branch of uh, actual legitimate implementation that you find across the world for cancer wards and all kinds of people. Art therapy is a way to help people get healthy again.
Hmm.
So, and there's a lot of research that backs this up. I can't cite one on the top of my head right now, but if for anyone interested, it's out there for sure.
Interesting. And of course, your art is producing events as well as sound healing. You produce incredible music that is really relaxing and calming. And from my own experience, going to several of your events and listening to your music, I often come away feeling deeply peaceful. And I would love to hear from you how that works, why it works, what are some of the mechanisms of why sound specifically has an effect on our physiology.
It's a great, wonderful question. I'd like to start off by putting it out there that and I don't know, it's a little bit laggy, Cosmo, but I'm going to trust that everything's fine. I'm going to keep just going
Mm-hmm.
ahead. Even though it seems to
Yep.
be a little bit of a delay here, but I'm not worried about that. Okay, so I want to start off by saying that I'm not a medical doctor, and I am first and foremost, I'm an artist, musician, performer. Um, and I have kind of been a philosopher and a seeker of truth my whole life, whatever that may mean, seeker of truth. But always not, having an attempt to not leave any rock unturned has been my motto. And so in the last, I'd say 15 or so years, that's brought me through a range of things from meditation to
Mm-hmm.
energy work to conscious festivals to YouTube videos on UFOs and aliens and ancient history of secret technologies and cultures and practices and entheogens and the whole gamut of resources that I think are there and rightfully so for anyone with discernment and who's ready to dive in and to really come to their own conclusions, to be able to explore any of those topics or fields, especially the traditional sciences, and how all these things can actually, it's a multi-layered unfolding of deeper and more refined awareness of how we are not only affecting our environment, but how we're affected by our environment.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's very much my interest. And to answer your question, to get really granular with it, as far as how it pertains to sound therapy and my approach with it, when I learned meditation 10 years ago, I learned TM. I had to leave LA to go and live in Fairfield, Iowa at the TM headquarters. I lived there for about 2 years on
Mm-hmm.
campus. And through daily meditative practice, twice a day, what they said would happen to me happened to me. I experienced levels of deep integrated calm, shifts of awareness, shifts of my consciousness, and an overall just complete, almost like a life altering
Mm-hmm.
redirection on the path I was going in towards an entirely new, more refined, more rich, and less strenuous uh, type of unfolding of my life. And what I mean by less
Amazing.
strenuous is that they teach you, meditation is about when you tap into a meditative flow, it's you let go of this need as a physical body and as a human to figure out, identify, and make action on
Mm-hmm.
things, and instead you connect with
Mm-hmm.
the more vibrational quality from within, in which those qualities that are really really deep, that are found in each and every one of us, once we tap in, it's like it emerges out like a spring outwardly
Mm-hmm.
from our being. And this is something you start to feel when 2 3 weeks into your meditation, like, what does all this stuff mean they're talking about, this hocus pocus? And then you start to actually feel these bubbles of joy, like crackling through, and you go, oh, I feel really pleasurable. You start to compare it to any other type of pleasure that you know of, and you're like, what is this? It's better than sex, It's like, what else can you compare? It's like chocolate, or it's like being on a roller coaster, or it's like, and you try your best to compare, but what you do realize is there's a bliss there. There's a blissful feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And but I think they say within the bliss in the Vedas, they talk about this, and within Eastern philosophy, they talk about um, how a bliss is a very much important part of the transcendental state, right? It's a naturally occurring part of it because it's this almost intrinsic value that you will achieve if you allow yourself to get there. And so my sound practice And the physics behind how I approach sound is very much based off of the same physics that I was experiencing behind the changes of my consciousness during meditations, after meditations, integrating them for 6 months, integrating them for 2 years, 3 years. And the way in which slight adjustments in my awareness, subtle, tiny stuff that you wouldn't even notice, was then leading to this new sum, which was the body of work that I call quantum harmonics, based off of a deep inward listening through a meditative state with slight mechanical movements and adjustments in real time, feeling into a space, whether that's with individuals or a group, whether that's physical or non-local, whether that's broadcasted or however, whatever. You can connect and we can connect. And so it's almost my duty, responsibility to continue my meditation practice, shut off
Hmm.
my mind, and then experience a place from within where all my values are set and all the values are defined and eternal. And from there, an emergence can take place. I believe all artists tap in. This is tapping in. Skaters, skiers, snowboarders, extreme arts, painters, performance artists, they tap into this core space
Hmm.
where they do less, but more happens because of it. And so in the same way, I'm doing the same thing and I'm applying that to very slow mechanical movements of ambient synthesis as to create changes in the awareness, rest levels, and just overall expansive quality of someone's awareness, mind, self-awareness, or what we would call their consciousness, which it's hard to pin down what exactly that is. But for me, it's kind of a larger or broader um, conglomeration of these more micro parts of ourselves, the chattering monkey mental self or the emotional self. Our consciousness is something that in many ways transcends our mental or emotional self, yet our consciousness is very much animated around our mental and emotional self. It's hard to talk about in either metaphysical or scientific terms, but it is not our mind. It's clear that our consciousness is our consciousness and our mind is our mind. And if those things intersect, in many ways they do, then that's valid. And there's also room to explore where they don't.
Beautiful. So, real quick before we continue, I think your necklace is making a little bit of a jingling sound. I'm not sure if it's quite what that is.
Sorry
Yeah,
about
yeah,
that.
yeah. No worries. Yeah, would you mind? Yeah, awesome, perfect. Yeah, I just want to get that out of the way before we keep going. Awesome. So
Totally. It was definitely not the gnomes or the elves around the corner.
they're there. So you spent 2 years at this TM center. What initially attracted you to go there, and what was that experience like spending so much time there?
Hmm. I'm pretty sure, yeah, that was actually after my first Burning Man. So I went to Burning Man, everything kind of as it would. This is 2010. Um, Everything got flipped upside down, and I had some experiences that were really, really prolific. One of which was I passed out in this chakra tent. I had no idea what a chakra even was, but I must have been sleeping in there for 2 or 3 hours. It was like fifth or sixth day of the festival. When I woke up, I felt like I had received or downloaded each of those chakra little. There was this section for each of the seven chakras with mantras on the wall and color oriented, pillows. And I didn't understand any of it when I walked in, and I feel like when I walked out, it was like deeply embedded in me, if that even makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Or it
Something
was
started
already
happening,
there,
this
but you remembered
phenomenon. I
it.
came back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it too, because a big part of what I was reading there was almost like, oh yeah, this feels like something I know already inside me, and very much, yes, very much feels like it was more of a reactivation of things inside as opposed to
Mm-hmm.
necessarily stumbling upon something entirely new to me. And I think anyone of your listeners, including yourself, myself, we can really think about it, how our patterns of our life go back so much farther than when we think things
Mm-hmm.
really popped off or started. And you start to see how these patterns are connected throughout our childhood and our earliest memories, really. And I've always felt I wanted to do something to be in service or help people or do something greater than myself. But I've also have to keep that in check, because it's like, what does that mean? It's very easy to tell yourself, oh, you're saving the world, but who's really saving the world? There's a lot of amazing people doing great work out there. So it's quite a thing to live up to. And at the same time, it's easy to take a position or a job or a role in life where you may not love it, and it may actually even be dark. It may not even cause more harm than good, but it's a means of living. And so there's this whole range, of choices. And all I want to do is be the best I can be and create something that is an extension of my own healing, and hopefully can help people, and we can step into a new level of like what implications are with that. You know, Sorry, I didn't mean to get sidetracked,
No
but
worries.
um, can you remind me what your question was that
Yeah,
led me on that
absolutely.
trail?
Yeah. What inspired you to go to a TM center for
Thank
two
you. So
years?
so so to take everything I've said, yeah, thank you. At that point in my life, it was kind of this. It was right after that 2008-9 housing crisis, and everything was confusing for many people. And I had to just leave LA, so that's what I did. It was amazing. It was like, hey, do you want to come to this campus where there's 97% funding by grants, most of which comes from TM meditators or people who've attended the university who have given back. So, and it's a vegetarian campus. They taught you Vedic sciences, meditation. It seemed really cool and progressive, and exactly what I wanted to do at 22, 23. So I did, and um, it was a great choice because it was a catalyst for so much growth that led to me finding this quantum harmonics method, creating it. And then, of course, the history that starts after the point when I came back. It's been going on 8 years now. I came back to LA in 2012. So everything since that point is really based off of the fuel, was the launching pad, was this TM university. And if anyone out there is a meditator or meditates consistently, you know what I'm talking about. If anyone out there has tried to meditate yet has some trouble with it or
Mm.
would want to master it, anyone can master meditation. It takes, I'll be honest, I don't want to make it sound easier or harder than it really is. I'll be totally honest. If you were to make attempts for 3 to 4 days, I'd say by the fourth or fifth day, legitimately you would have a solid meditation. So in
Mm-hmm.
less than a week, somebody can go from completely insecure, thinking this is not something I can do, I can't quiet my mind, I can't experience that bliss he's talking about. I'm pretty sure like 95%, 90% of the people tuning in can experience that with less than a week if they just stuck to it for more than 2 or 3 days. Because the first couple days will be hard, but then you kind of break through and then you experience it, and then you can't go back. It starts to become a part of your overall like sensory awareness. It's really incredible.
Yeah. So TM is interesting to me for a few reasons. The first, in my research, is finding what they're calling the Maharishi effect, which is this idea that
Yeah.
if we have a certain number of people meditating, that the uh, combined field effect of that collective consciousness would have ripple effects that affects the whole planet. And that was oh, I'm getting some feedback there. Weird. Okay, now
Sorry
everything's
about
good. No,
that.
it's all good.
Sorry about that.
Oh, you're checking in. Yeah, so the combined effect
So
of
the
everyone
Maharishi
together.
effect,
Yeah.
yes.
Oh.
So they do have some interesting research that they've been compiling, that especially around Kosovo. So the Kosovo conflict in the 90s, they sent meditators there, and within I'd say a short period of time after is when the conflict ended there. And then of course they point to some research they did around DC as well. Um, and then there was some more anecdotal claims that were also made around the university or campus. For example, some things that were said around the Marishi effect as it applied to the town of Fairfield was that Iowa, being a tornado-rich state, uh, tornadoes would avoid Fairfield, so they would either go around it or just
Mm,
die or fizzle out on
mm-hmm.
entry. Or it's same with like fires. Like there was this kind of idea that there was this bubble of safety there. And look,
Hmm.
whether you believe what I'm saying or not, it's totally up to you. And I don't even know if I totally believe it or not. But I will say this: when I first got there, they used to talk about this feeling you get when you come into the field of this town, because there's something like 5,000 meditators that meditate there twice a day daily. So
Yeah, powerful.
you legit feel something in that town. I mean, it's a palatable feeling, and especially when you leave. You're like,
Hmm.
we're not in that bubble anymore. It's almost like a pressure on your skin. I'm not even kidding. And the closer you get to that center where everyone's meditating at those domes, it's the more rich it emanates, and that's a part of what I think sells their a lot of their claims, is that when you go there, you can't deny that
Yeah.
there's something there, something going on.
Yeah. I
So the
definitely
Marshy effect, it's interesting, but you know,
I definitely I
did you
can
know that they
understand
have a
that.
U.S. military? Yeah, they have literally the TM organization has TM meditator who's also in the U.S. military, who serves as a kind of, what's the word? He's like an ambassador for the meditation program units in which they oversee meditation,
Hmm.
installation of these meditation programs across the world,
Huh.
to either instill the Maharishi effect or
Hmm.
to just teach local populace meditation, or the soldiers. They also need to learn meditation for their own calm, right? So they literally have a member of the military who's like an appointed TM ambassador, who's also a TM meditator. How do I know this? Because he taught me. He was my TM teacher. So
Awesome.
I forget his rank, but yes, and he was involved. They literally called it like defense. It was like defense meditation, defense technologies, or they had some term.
Yeah, the other thing that caught my eye in my research of TM was what they're calling yogic flying, and essentially they're like claiming that humans at some point are going to be able to fly through some activation of the energy inside of us, and that was like interesting. You look and watch these videos of people like hopping around on their knees, and it's like, okay, is this real? Like it's like kind of strange to me. I mean, I've had my own experiences in, the lucid dream state of flying that feels very real and very natural, just as natural as walking. So I can understand this capacity of humans to be able to fly, at least in this altered state. But in this dimension, I'm curious, is that something that you came across at all while you while you were there? Or, like it stood out as one of those things. I was like, I'm not quite so sure about this program, but it was interesting for sure.
The flying is a big part of. How do I explain this? Yeah, it's definitely hilarious seeing the people hopping around, and especially because it's like no one's quite flying, but they are definitely hopping. They're
Yeah.
hoppers. A few of my
Uh,
friends, my age, they enrolled in the program, so they became siddhas, as they would call them, and
mhm.
eventually flyers. And so I knew a lot of them. They would tell me what went down in those domes, and as far as some really incredible stuff. Like some of those guys that meditate in there, because remember they have two domes. They separate genders, so men go to one, the women go to the other, and you have something like I don't know, 1,000 plus people in each dome at a time, and they're massive. So with that said, I've heard stories that some of those older dudes in there and those older ladies, like they have some serious Jedi skills. Like their
Mhm.
sense of awareness of their surroundings and tapping into things and having access to like information relating to people, things that are around them that the average person just either doesn't pay attention to, have access to, or pick up on. It's quite phenomenal. Even some claims around being able to diagnose and look into health matters as it relates to Ayurveda and picking
Mhm.
up on cues in the physiology, and just the whole idea there with everything is how the meditation is integrated around the yogic lifestyle, the Ayurvedic lifestyle, the structures facing east, and having a room's positioned almost like a feng shui architectural component to all of the buildings, and this great experiment to create literally a town, a city. It's very, very, very small. It's a town, 10,000 people, where all these philosophies are brought into place, and then people meditate daily, twice a day, consistently. And so I don't think of there's any other long running experiment like that that's been going on, and it's still going on. And there's a lot of things that are to a benefit there. There's also a lot of sad parts that people don't talk about. There's a relatively higher suicide rates in this town. You know, there's some other issues. People don't feel like they can necessarily fully be or express a full part of themselves in a ways, because the anything can become dogmatic. And in many ways, this TM thing, you know, you can't say the flying is illegitimate and a pursuit not worth going after and question it, because literally everyone there at the entire school, all the way up to John Hagelin, down to the top scientists, physicists, doctors, the board, everyone would be like, you're going against a very important core of our teacher and what it is we're trying to go after. And what they're trying to go after ultimately is enough people meditating where anything could be possible, including, yes, potentially humans flying with their legs crossed, like straight up, like Aladdin and a flying carpet without the carpet part, just taking off. And so I think you have to look at how that's steeped in. And to sum it up in 30 seconds right here, here's what I'll say. He came in with the Beatles in the 50s. He created a whole movement of meditation. He charged money for it. They made a lot of money. They made a whole organization. It benefited countless thousands of people's lives, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands who became meditators. And then from there, somewhere around the 70s, they started introducing, they're like, we don't have global enlightenment yet. And everyone's been sold that by 1976, we'd have global enlightenment. We have to come up with the advanced meditator program. And then we have to come up with the flying program that's $3,000 or $5,000, you know, and then you can become a flyer. And then by 1995, we'll get enlightenment. And then by, you know, it's this matter of you keep setting the goalpost farther and farther. And what is the goalpost relating to? It's about how people are paying money for a program, so there's more people using the program. So enlightenment comes when the guru who's alive. It cycles back into the same human condition of a cult of personality,
Yep.
and a cultish type movement. Mm-hmm. And that's the unfortunate part, because if you zoom all the way back to 1955, 1960, when it was just simply the TM meditation, the Vedic meditation as it was from the East, questionably brought here, by the way, we don't know, because Guru Dev, his teacher, supposedly had a second in line, and it wasn't Maharishi, but that's a whole other topic. If you want to go down that rabbit hole, he wasn't even the one supposed to bring the meditation practice here. That's a part of why they get a lot of flack as well. If you really know the inside, is that it was trademarked and made into a consumerist product. And what it really is a Vedic meditation, including a mantra. This goes back hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands of years. And yes, go ahead.
Well, I'm reminded a bit of Wild Wild Country and Osho, and, you know, not to say that they're the same thing at all, but there's, you know, that this blending of spirituality and capitalism that don't seem to go very well, or at least in, you know, that experiment. I don't know if you had watched that show on Netflix about, you know, what went down there, and I believe it was Washington. Don't remember all the specific details, but that was a fascinating series, you know, where
well, I think they had a different approach in the sense that Maharishi was a true capitalist, and I don't know if Osho necessarily was. He was something. I know Osho liked his Rolls Royces. I know he liked living a certain lifestyle for himself.
Yeah.
And I also know that all of his attendees had to change their names and had to wear certain garb and had to eat together and had to almost like partake in this group ritual of cleansing their identity and becoming something anew. And I think he was facilitating that for them. And that included everything from his breath of fire practice to his protocols and his lifestyle, his talks, his speeches, his lectures. To an outsider, maybe you don't understand it, but to someone who's seeking that, needs that, wants that type of discipline, they go and find it in there. And then, hey, maybe you end up doing some questionable stuff you didn't think you would do because it's not what you thought it'd be. It happens all the time with these movements. And that's why I'm not really for a lot of these movements with these hierarchical, like guru figures or dogmas or practices that are based around inhibiting certain qualities or components of our natural human self, or overly expressing some of those parts, like overly sexualizing group orgies in the
Yeah.
sense of Osho. Right? There's always this extreme that comes in where you have to not follow an as
Right.
inclinate. You have to get out of your comfort, and it's a catch-22 because you have to get out of your comfort to grow and evolve. And they're trying to sell you on you'll evolve and grow through our program by getting out of your comfort. So we live in a culture, a lawsuit culture. You know, if you barely bump into me, I'll sue you. So how we have this accountability and lawsuit culture that really makes it very hard to have this type of guru leaders that are not able to be then held accountable for leading people to this edge. Really, it's just what their role is in other cultures.
Is this some natural tendency of the ego? Like, I'm curious to understand, why, we in these movements, these spiritual communities, there's this kind of this pure intention to help people and improve the world, and then somewhere along the line something happens where there is this
There's
corruption,
a
and
power
not.
discrepancy.
Yeah, what do you mean?
There's a power discrepancy. Basically, you have a few too few. Usually, the problem stems from too few people with too much power.
Mm.
So
Mm-hmm.
you have either one person, his right hand man or female, whatever it is, who they're basically calling all the shots. And
Mm-hmm.
what's happening in these movements is they're
Mm.
naturally attracting people who are seekers, who are
Mm-hmm.
healing, who have been abused,
Mm-hmm.
who are trying to find something, who are getting away from something else. And so a lot of the time, not all the time, but I'd say if you have a pie, out of your followers, like 80% of them are like abused, tortured, hurt souls, and the 20% are just are just the natural inclined, let's say, seeker who wants to have self development and is curious, and may or may not necessarily have those degrees of abuse, but a lot of them do. And so what you get is this group of people that is easily manipulatable and is easily sold on this idea that through your program all of their salvation, more or less, their connection, it's no different from what the prior kings and monarchs represented, which is a connection to divine. And everyone has their own connection to the divine. There's no one person between you and your connection to your divine self, to your healing, inner healing self. And this is called a life economy, isn't it? So it's a future, it's a reality where the value is on life, which is the most important intrinsically valuable resource on the planet, in the universe, anywhere we know. It's life itself. So with that said, a lot of these groups and gurus and facilitators, they take on, willingly, unwillingly, it becomes a part of their persona, of this cult of
Mm-hmm.
personality. And so what has to happen is, for the new paradigm, is people have to be extremely cognizant and aware of where those tendencies may arise, and to undo them and nip them in the butt, and be aware and also redirect the tendency to take a power in a way where it's not distributed. My approach with quantum harmonics is to remind and put the energy back into the individual. I'm not the healer, you're the healer. I'm a technician with a system assisting you on finding your own self through your own journey on your own internal mind. I'll
Mm-hmm.
never tell you what to think. I'll never tell you what mantra to use. I'll never tell you what lineage this comes from and what lineage you should be a part of or not be a part of. And there's nothing oriented around having to subscribe to or have a belief system. It's the opposite. I want you to uncondition and unbelief yourself. I want you to unbelief all the stuff that has accumulated by just letting it be neutral. Because what happens is then we come to our own assessment away from the conditioning, and we pick and choose what we really are moving forward. This is why meditation works. It pulls back, puts everything on the table, and then we go, that was too heavy. That was too this. That was too that. I don't need this for my continual forward journey. And we pick what we need and go forward with it. That's why meditation practice, that's the practice, that's the function. That's what it does. For me, at least.
I love that you say that you are not a healer. And I resonate with that because it's true. Like we all have the natural capacity to heal ourselves from within from inside. You know, if we cut our finger, we have the natural ability to heal that wound. And something so simple is actually really profound, right? We kind of take it for granted because it's something that, happens somewhat often and we don't really think too much about it. But it's true that we are able to naturally heal ourselves. And, when we engage with people like you and we're able to hear the music and these beautiful tones that you're playing, it is sort of sending a signal to our bodies from within to create a response that matches that frequency. I'm curious, I'm sort of like picking at or grabbing at sort of how it works, but could you talk a little bit about how the frequencies come into this in terms of what you're playing, and then I hear it from my body, like where and how does that happen?
Well, you do have nerve endings in the ear. And so as sound enters the ear, it actually hits these different points, and it can carry in that information through really the ear, through the brain, through the body. So there's a lot more happening with our ears than we initially would think or assume. For example, we think the ears are just involved with hearing sounds, but you wouldn't assume off the bat unless you had the understanding of how also our balance, something so important to a bipedal upright posture, is directly related to our ears and the ability to hear acoustically, spatially. And so the relationship between hearing and our state of being is so just mysterious and so prolific. And it's the one sense you never shut off. You cannot touch things, you cannot see things, you close your eyes when you sleep, you cannot taste things, you cannot smell things. But your ears are always on and they're always hearing and listening. And so it's almost like the one sense that when you're born is turned on, and it's on for life. And there's no point where you're not using that sense. And to me, it makes a connection that there's something more deeply taking place here with our interaction with sounds. And so to circle back to your question on the physics of it, I think what's happening is sound has the ability to mimic nature and natural sounds.
Mm-hmm.
Natural sounds affect us because they're the oldest sounds. So if you can imagine lying down in a cave and hearing the pitter patter of a thunderstorm outside on the rocks, and if you could just imagine that 5,000 years ago, 50,000 years ago, 300,000 years ago, a million years ago, the same sound was happening, the same waterfalls crashing, the streams, the rivers, the wind. So we've evolved from single-celled organisms to multi-celled to amphibious, reptilian, mammalian, whatever. All of these things have branched out with these natural sounds as very much a value that's been set since the infancy of life on this planet.
Mm-hmm.
And the way we can actually heal ourselves is to connect to or listen to sounds that are natural in their expression. So that's either literally natural sounds, like listening to the sound of water or wind, but it could also be sounds that mimic these movements. And that's what sound therapy is really much based off of, whether it's a gong, a bowl, a synthesizer, a voice.
Mm-hmm.
It's the ability to create a movement of sounds that I think mimic natural movement and flow. And then from there, we kind of orient around a restful awareness, a parasympathetic state, one in which the stress hormones involved with like cortisol and these things that are involved with keeping one eye open while you sleep so that leopard doesn't eat your neck. What if you were in a steel cube that you knew was safe and you had everyone outside who was protecting you and there was security cameras and you slept in and you knew there was no threat in there? You would sleep. Maybe that's a little bit claustrophobic of an example, but I guess the idea is if you knew there was no threat, you would have a kind of sleep without releasing stress or stress chemicals or having that fight or flight. Instead, you would have a restful sleep. And the sounds help to balance and to orient our mind, our psyche, and our pace around rhythms and flows that are connected to natural patterns and in which we entrain ourselves and we resonate with in order to change not only our brainwave systems and patterns, but also to lower stress chemicals like cortisol while lifting through listening through the ears and having a musical enjoyment experience. We actually release serotonin and dopamine and endorphins. So that takes place and you're boosting all these chemicals. So in essence, the right type of sound listening experience is a chemistry experiment where you're boosting certain chemicals and you're lowering other ones and you're directly affecting the biochemistry inside. And so it's like alchemy. You're actually changing your chemical composition on a micro level. And at the macro level, you're experiencing shifts of awareness around how your mind is perceiving yourself and reality and the problems and conflicts in your life. And I say problems and conflicts because when you can orient, associate with, see, and overcome and transcend your problems and conflicts, then there's less of an anxiety leech latching at your neck and nerves and back and brain, which is inhibiting your overall nervous system, optimal health, and balance. So the interconnectedness between our emotional pain body, the things we hold on to, our meditative state, our peace of mind, and the rate at which we go through life is such an interesting symbiotic relationship with our chemistry and physiology and the chemicals that we're releasing at any point that also dictates how we are feeling inside. So I guess that's a lot to take in. But from where I'm at now, about I'd say 10 years of pursuing these things, that is what it seems like is happening here with this mammalian bodysuit of ours.
I love what you're saying about sound and music being an alchemical process. It's really fascinating to consider the ways in which what we hear is affecting all the various chemicals inside of our brain and inside of our body. And it's true that when we listen to music, there's really nothing else in the world that has the capacity to instantly change the way that we feel. When we're listening to a beautiful piece of music, it's a very powerful experience. There's really nothing else like it. It's amazing and beautiful. And when you talk about these natural frequencies, I know that you often use music with 432 hertz. I would love to get an understanding of what that even means and also the difference between 432 and 440. I know there's a bit of history there as well.
Great question. I love that question. There's been a very big disservice to this whole sound healing movement because there's a lot of, as with many things, a lot of misinformation that's been circulating for, I'd say, close to 20 years or more as it relates to this field. And so it's confused a lot of people. When I started this journey myself in 2009 or 10, there was not as many resources, and what it is that I was stumbling upon was kind of guiding me towards a direction, but I was always skeptical of all of it until I came across this 432 hertz thing, right? So here's the premise in a nutshell. All the music that we perform or produce in our standard, Western tuning methods and systems are tuned around a frequency. And if you hit the middle A on a piano, it'll vibrate a certain amount of times. And that amount of times for the fourth A, boom, 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 in the middle of a piano is 440 cycles. So when you hit that, it should vibrate exactly that many times. And that is how we set a standard that everyone abides by. And that's been the case since the early 20th century. So when I came across this 432 hertz, it was this idea that you tune down from 440 to 432. And the amount of waves that oscillate in that second of time are less by 8. And that is important. Why? Because then you start to get into this numerology, this interconnectedness of patterns in nature and math, sacred geometry, and how music could perhaps converge with those principles and create this value within, just by nature of connecting and tapping into that mathematics of the sacred geometrical nature of the universe itself. Turns out, not likely, probably not the case. But I will say this as a preface. I still use 432 and I tune down to 432. And I'll say it's an artist preference. I prefer it. It's, for me, the way that I like the tones to feel and sound. And when I show people an A/B test, they always go, yeah, I prefer that one way more. And I think it's just the quality of that pitch. It's tuned down. And when you tune up, it's maybe better for movies and jazz and blues and rock bands and commercial music. So I tell people there is no right or wrong. It's just preference. You tune, find maybe it's better for meditative work because the tones are expressed differently. And that's the level I bring it at. And so it's ultimately about how we convey and move the sounds, which, like I said, mimic natural sounds to evoke an effect, right? The frequency itself is not as important as the relationships between the frequencies are. The frequency itself is arbitrary in some degree. It's based off of how we measure a second of time, and that's based off of a bunch of other things. But the point is to then extrapolate that and to say that somehow connects to mathematics and numbers that have to do with an actual physical structure and how a structure is assembled. You'd have to really jump to connect those things. And no one's been able to do that yet, to show the real intersection between why and how any of the sacred geometry and numbers and harmonics that we would converge in, what we would call sound healing theory, would then legitimize them as it relates to sound versus architecture or any other field where these things are found and legitimized in. And so it's really one in which it's more about undoing what we think we know about this stuff. And I think there's a book, Leonard Horowitz, he's the one who created this idea of these healing frequencies, 528 hertz, maybe some of your users have heard of them. Solfeggio.
Yeah.
If the whole thing is bunk, and I say this because there's only one source for this, it's Leonard Horowitz, no one else. He's the one guy who came up with it and capitalized early before anyone else could define what this stuff was. And his claims were that the ancient Gregorian monks basically used to use these specific frequency values, yet there's no way they would have even known what those monks were using because they didn't measure cycles per second. They didn't have technology like that. They didn't even know what cycles per second were. And to top it off, he uses this word solfeggio frequency. Solfeggio has always related to the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. That's the solfeggio scale. It's a technique used so you can know where middle C is. Do, re, mi. That's the solfege. And he took it and made this mystical solfeggio frequencies. And he applied this 528 and 964 and 7. And he related these to biblical things that the Bible speaks of Jesus on the 9th day, does this thing and this. So all this like pseudo-significant spiritual, new age, multi-dimensional, sacred geometrical, just hodgepodge salad, which became the copy-paste culture of sound therapy frequencies online. And you get this 528 love frequency as this thing. He claims that that specific frequency, which I'm sorry, guys, but it sounds kind of something like this. Like just simply listening to that has a heart resonance frequency, right? And which heart? Small heart? Big heart? I mean, every heart is a different size. So which heart are we talking about here? And then what they'll say is, oh, it's a metaphysical heart frequency. So it's the heart chakra frequency. Then it's like, how do you even begin to measure what the metaphysical heart frequency would be, what the range is, and how you know if you're hitting it or not?
Yeah.
So there's all these we have to really, really undo what we think we know and start over. And so here's my attempt with quantum harmonics. Sounds should mimic natural sounds. They should sound like nature. And the healing should come from within the user or the experiencer through a combination of ambient passive listening and accessing meditative relaxing states of consciousness in order to induce harmonized brainwave states and regulated hormones, chemicals, dopamine, endorphins, and cortisol levels to then experience the sum of all those things taking place within an hour or less to then experience truly what transformation could be on a micro macro level if they stay consistent with the practice. So this is what I'm advocating for. This is my solution, and this is where I'd like to take away from what we would call frequencyism and more towards where we can learn more, study, and evolve the field, and bring more credit and more just of the proper type of critique to it, so it could grow where it should. Because there's something here.
Yeah, I appreciate that perspective, and it is somewhat surprising to hear from, someone that has been in the field of sound healing for, I think you said a decade, right? Like, you have a pretty deep set of experience producing these tones and soundtracks and events that are all centered around this practice of sound healing and sound baths. And it's funny because I'm staring across at a folded up set of Solfeggio tuning forks that I bought a few years ago because I was really excited and interested to, get into this stuff. And I have to admit, like, they're fun to play around with, but I haven't really used them in a few years. But it's just funny, like, you're saying that they're bunk, and honestly, personally, like, I don't know myself whether they're real or not, but I trust that as someone that has been directly involved in this field for so long, that what you're talking about.
I want people to just remember that anything can be healing if they apply it in their life in the way that they'd like to, that brings pleasure or joy, including your tuning forks that are staring right at you. It doesn't matter what the numbers are on them. What matters most is how you can connect with and play or perform them and oscillate them and move them in and out to mimic waves or stars or other components that are out there and in us. And if you could do that with your forks, then they're not bunk. But what is bunk is that somebody sold them to you and made money on this idea that simply playing them alone could cure your kidneys or balance your heart or do something to cancer or anything like that, which we're getting in this part of society now where it's like any claim could be made and any blog can post it and it gets rehashed and YouTube video goes up, and then before you know it, there's this like false truth. And it's really hard because we're all truth seekers and want to get to the bottom of it. But in many ways, people want to mislead us, and it's easier than ever to mislead people. And there's a whole plethora of reasons why people want to mislead you. Sometimes they want you to buy their product. Sometimes they want you to, it's not all sinister. But we have to do the due diligence and get to the bottom of it and be skeptical, and also have arm ourselves with the knowledge and understanding that the resources are out there, and we can learn and access whatever tools are available to make the best informed decisions on what is in the best interest of our own therapy and healing. So I want to arm everyone with that in a life economy.
Yeah, beautiful. And I want to get into visual reality and the events that you produce, right? That's a big part of your life. And that's one of the primary ways that I have known you through, with Michael Strauss and a few other folks on your team have been producing these amazing events over the last 2 years that are really at the intersection of a lot of what we talk about here on the podcast, right? You have technology, virtual reality, augmented reality, meditation, sound healing, visionary art, a lot of the things that I'm super excited and passionate about as well. And of course, you perform these sound healing meditation experiences at your events. In large part, these are events that are supported by and for the spiritual and consciousness communities here in Los Angeles. And I would love to get your perspective on these communities as a whole, right? Like, what do you love about them, and where do you see areas for growth?
I love how poignant that question is. Actually kind of caught me off guard because I was thinking about this today. We so often orient ourselves, a lot of us do, around what cultures we find ourselves in or what communities we circle in. And I think it's very natural for humans to do. They find, where's my tribe? What is my tribe? And especially in California and LA, there's so many different cultures, subcultures, groups, and interests. So as it pertains to the conscious, what we'll call spiritual conscious culture of SoCal, you know, when I lived in Iowa, as I was mentioning earlier, it was so easy to be authentic, drop in with people, no compensation, overcompensation of the self. People just keeping it real, and having like real authentic relationships, and 20, 30 people getting together, cooking together, and just small town vibes, and then you come back to LA, and first thing I went to was this festival in Malibu, and the yoga teacher was wearing all jewelry and had her breast out and was breastfeeding her baby, and while teaching the class, mind you. And I thought that was so cool. But I was also reminded, like, I'm not in Kansas anymore. I should say Iowa. I'm definitely in Malibu. Like, this is happening. This is a thing, and cameras are everywhere. And so, what do I think of the communities here? I think, like any community, there's a healthy and a sick part of any
Mm.
household, any
Mm-hmm.
community, any relationship.
Sure.
Um, and I think that the community is so well intentioned. The music festival culture, the spiritual culture, I think it's very well intentioned. I think its heart is in all the right places. I think the people who make up these collectives, these cultures, are the kinds of people who care about their own health. They care about the health of the planet. They care about um, perhaps bringing a more just and equitable and more balanced harmony to the way of life for all people. And I think at the same time, though, what you get a lot of times is this idealistic, like overly
Mm.
unrealistic, idealistic, eyes
Mm-hmm.
closed mentality, which is the
Mm.
opposite of what woke culture is. You get almost
Mm-hmm.
completely regressive kind of people
Wow.
who are against anything new, anything old, especially, I should say, anything old. This is the issue because there's a lot of wisdom and knowledge in the old. There's a lot of tradition and lineage and answers in the old. Um,
Absolutely.
but but a part of it doesn't. I think there's this repelling away from parents that told you no. I think that's why people find themselves in spiritual festival cultures. They're part of
Mm-hmm.
a society of black sheep that was told that they had no value and they wanted to go out there and create their own value, and they did. And so don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, guys. That's my thing. Like, love your conservative cousins and love your mom and dad, and like just like live the principles you speak of. You talk about unconditional love and accepting people for who they are, accepting their differences, and we've come such a long way in doing this. Yet now it's ironic that it's almost the same community is now binding itself from and judging so harshly anyone out in the out who's not in the in culture. And it's such a mirror and a reflection of everything that the culture sprawled out of to be against. Once again, showing you how organizations, cultures become over time. They have a tendency to move towards the same thing they sought to escape.
Wow.
And in many ways, I think that it's an evolution of the cultures. And like all cultures, there's the imbalanced and the balanced. Now, what's the good part? What are the benefits? I've already, I think, mentioned and highlighted some of the things I like about the culture here. Um, and I don't want to make this sound like I'm being down or harsh on it, but it's very much fragmented, I feel, right now.
Mm.
Um, Between two types or more, but two types of distinct perspectives on it. Or there's this one love and light side where no need for fear, no need to look at things, no need to acknowledge things in the world that are dark, and just simply resonate with and come from a place of wholeness and goodness. There's another side that's like, but we need to be realistic because there's a tsunami coming, which involves looking at things and acknowledging things and understanding the mechanisms to then avoid problems in the future based off of an assessment of the past, and to apply them into real time and to make shifts together and work as a unison so we're armed with knowledge. And these two sides are a part of the same subculture, and they're friends and brothers and sisters and neighbors and uh, people who have so much passion and want the best for the world and for others, yet they have two different approaches, and so everyone's figuring it out. Everyone's figuring it out. That's, I guess, the best I can say.
Love it. What is it like to bear the responsibility of showing up as a conscious leader and showing up as a conscious leader within the visual reality context, right? You're producing these events for these communities,
Yeah, I
and
want to circle
what
back to. I would love to circle back to that. Yeah.
what has your personal development journey been like?
So I absolutely am so excited about the direction my life took about 4 years ago. Me and Michael Strauss decided to launch the first visual reality series of events with our friend Anshul, and the rest became history. Within a year, I think we were at VRLA, and then we did it twice with you guys. We just,
Mm-hmm.
it was such an immediate and fast way to live our principles, invite people into the space to share their work, and to have that community that was really um, it came naturally and organically, and you can't ask for anything better than that. And we're still going, guys. I mean, visual reality is stronger than ever. We're just evolving now in this new format, and
Right.
um, and so with that said, it's been, like I said, humbling. Leadership for me is not about moving up; it's about moving inward. So this whole process, I don't want to really. I downplay my leadership in this all. I don't. It's not something I think about too
Yep.
much, either in my sound healing or in my meditation facilitation or my work of visual reality. I don't really think about that much. I think more about how I can get my best work forward and what means I can take to do that with what partners and in what ways. And so I'm always focused on what it is I can do and in what way to continue to get my work out there in a way that seems to be helping people and seems to be providing them with the same relief and the same therapy that I've been getting and I get from this work. And that's really where my focus is. Of course, I acknowledge that with that comes this being attributed as a leader. People look at me in a leadership role, or sometimes maybe even more than I see in myself, or less. That comes to the territory. So with that, I really I just want to be as humble as possible and do one of two things: live a kind of semi-private life where I'm not totally out there. I'm just being totally real with you. Like, a lot of people reach out and connect, and I love that. But I'm in my flow. So I don't always get back to everyone in their messages. So if that's one of you, I'm sorry. There's a lot going on, but I want to be here for people. I want to help people at the same time. I want to show up for people. I want to show up for more than myself. And so the way I found a way to do this is through my sound and through creating mechanisms and delivery mechanisms where it can get out there and it can help people in the way that they may need it. That is no different for visual reality. It's the same. We were created because we wanted to make an event platform that utilized technology, art, and performance and therapeutic um, implementations, and of course community gathering in order to explore where these things could come together. And you've been a very big part of that, Cosmo. I think you've attended something like 5 or 6 of our events back in our original studio and gave us huge opportunities at VRLA to share our work, and we're for sure very, very grateful and humbled by all that you've done to support what we do and have done. So
Yeah, I appreciate that. And yeah, I mean, personally, I was really stoked to be able to support you guys and feature the what was the visionary art zone into the visual reality zone and at VRLA for a few years. And it was something that I was always the most excited about, because while I loved all the VR and tech at the expo, everything that you guys were producing and promoting within your space in the larger context of the expo was really kind of the frontier, the edge of consciousness and technology, right? That inner technology, not just having to wear a dorky looking headset, but to be promoting things like sound healing and vibrational healing beds and infrared light therapy and, of course, meditation and all that stuff that I'm kind of a nerd about. And yeah, I mean, I see you as being integral to the spiritual and consciousness communities through your events and through your work, and grateful to have you continue to do that through the live streams and be sharing your content and your magic with everyone through the internet. And yeah, I have one big question that I want to wrap up with before we get into our brief sound meditation journey, which is, how do you relate to spirituality?
It's something that I've really wrestled with, I should be honest, with maybe 20 years. I think in my early teens, I found myself calling myself an atheist because I
Mm-hmm.
just was entering a very logical, like scientific mind, and
Mm-hmm.
there's no way there could be a God. It's just impossible. There's just no way. And then from there, I think in my early 20s, I became spiritual, um,
Mm-hmm.
in a way that I never had before.
Mm-hmm.
I embraced things like prayer and deep contemplation, meditation in a way that felt so just good and right, but I'd never done before. And so I started to really carve out and define what my own spirituality meant for me. For me, I think it means creating a space within ourselves that is not about the human condition. It's about the potential for our greater self.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so what that means is it doesn't have to do with any per se symbols or deities or dogmas. It has more to do with making a space within the human temple and body and
Mm-hmm.
mind where we can tap in, and we are no longer our mind, body, or awareness. We're something beyond all of it. We're um, something that I think what quantum is showing us is it's almost a quantum state. I almost wish we could change spirituality to quantum
What do you mean by that?
because it's like you're tapping into a field that goes against all Newtonian principles
Mm-hmm.
and everything and all the physics and mechanics of how everything else should work. And in doing so, you can explore a complete chaotic and random and very complex, unpredictable source. And it's amazing how much that can inspire and motivate everything that's built on top of it. And I think there's a lot of parallels there, especially when you talk about particles turning into waves, turning into particles.
Mm-hmm.
And the way in which we're a particle through meditation, we become more of a wave. And by ending meditation, we reemerge back as a particle again. And so, yeah, I can't help but see that meditation is the technology, is such an ultimate technology. It's also
Mm-hmm.
the cheapest, most readily available, accessible to all, and can be done anytime, anywhere, including loud airport terminals, bus stations, anywhere where there's noise. Jackhammer, you can meditate next to one.
Yes, beautiful. It's an excellent point, and I love that you're bringing some of that Joe Dispenza philosophy in here, right, with the particle and wave information. And yeah, absolutely. I mean, meditation is, in a way, the ultimate technology, or I should say, the body is the ultimate technology, and it's kind of a big perspective shift to see it in that way, because it's one of those things that's staring us in the face. It's like we don't, because we're like, we're this, or rather we believe ourselves to be this body. We're so embodied that we really take it for granted, and um, don't really have a deep sense or appreciation necessarily throughout the day of all the complex processes that are occurring within our body to sustain life. And we have iPads and the streaming technology and webcams, and it's all the amazing product of the human intellect. But there's really nothing else like meditation, the ability for meditation specifically to induce states of relaxation, calm, and bliss that nothing else can really touch. So with that, I think that's a great segue into our closing section here. So Torkom, you've provided us with a brief sound meditation file that I'm going to play. And if whoever's listening, we can all take a moment to close our eyes and just tap into this beautiful music that Torkom has produced for us. So let me get that started in a moment.
Thanks for having me today, Cosmo. It's been a pleasure to be here and chat with you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for joining us. Here we go. Okay. So let's all close our eyes. Take a few deep breaths. Just feel into your body. Feel yourself sitting in the chair. And just notice the sensation of your back against the chair, wherever you're sitting, or your feet on the floor if you're standing. As you breathe in, breathe in through your heart area, through the chest, and imagine white, glowing light being sucked into that area in your heart like a vortex. And coming back out through the same space. And come back into your body. Slowly open your eyes. That was nice. Thank you, Torkom.
Thank you.
There's a lot to be grateful for. This coronavirus thing is an interesting scenario that we find ourselves in. But it's funny how quickly practices like meditation and specifically listening to your beautiful music can remind us of all the beauty in the world. Even just going for a walk and the weather's nice and I'm looking outside and looking at the trees and the sunlight. Like, wow. The world is so beautiful amidst all the chaos and the craziness.
There's never been a more important time for people to not get all the information from their internet and TV and to get the information from inside themselves. And I hope that's the lesson that people can be left with today is whether you're a meditator, you've never meditated before, you're curious, you're not curious. This is the opportunity. This is the time where that kind of practice, that kind of consistency can deliver so much return to someone's mental health, physical health, physiology, but most importantly, to open one up to the infinite potential and opportunities that are out there that many times arise just when we're ready for them. That's that phone call, that email, that response that you didn't think you'd ever get, and all of a sudden it just shows up. You start meditating. It's weird how that works. I didn't believe it, but it's true. It kind of puts you in this positive right action. And so the trick is, folks, create the space and consistency. And in less than 1 week, you'll be a pro. I promise. Just got to do it 20 minutes twice a day. Close your eyes. Focus on the breath. Focus on the calm. Focus on the body. Here's the one easiest relaxing technique I can give everyone that you can do anytime to put you in a deep state. Just imagine that as you close your eyes and you go deeper into a meditative state with your breath, feel that your skin is almost like the layer between your flesh and the air is dissolving, almost like you're letting go of your skin. And if you can feel inside like dropping and letting go of that barrier between you and the outside world, you can feel it. And you can come back actually into your body. Like, oh, I'm here. And then you can actually do the opposite and of constrict, and you can just release. If you just remind yourself on releasing, you actually experience the whole body stretching out. That's a very effective way to meditate without a mantra or breath or focusing on anything other than expansion itself, expansion of the self beyond the skin. It works for anyone. So I want to thank you, Cosmo. Thank you for allowing this space and for inviting me on to be here with you on Life Economy. And it's been a pleasure to chat with you today. Thanks to everyone for tuning in.
Absolutely. Thank you for providing us with your amazing music and for your presence. And this has been a very enjoyable conversation. Where can people find out more about your work?
Thank you. So I'm actually going through a whole rebranding, rebuilding, including my website. So people can just find me on Facebook or Instagram, Torkom Ji, Torkomji, and shoot me a message on Insta. And also my music page is torkom.bandcamp.com. And I've launched a Patreon. So if you want to join on Patreon for $5 a month, I'm doing 4 live stream sound bath transmissions. That's $1.25 a session. It's unheard of. Remember, these sessions used to cost $25 to $30 in person, and now I've made them $1.25. So if you find a lower price, bring it and I'll match it. I don't think you're going to. With that said, guys, that's patreon.com/TorkomJ.
Beautiful. Thank you, Torkom. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. This has been another episode of A Life Economy. We'll be back next Friday with Scott Weinberg on May 1st, talking about the opportunity we have in front of us to redesign human civilization. Not a small thing. It should be an interesting conversation. That'll happen on May 1st, May Day. And thank you again. And we'll see you in a week. Bye, everyone.
All right. Bye, everybody.